What's up everybody, Natalie here, and today we're talking about the 5 most surprising things about going vegan, because there are a lot of things about going vegan that people don't really talk about, and some of them may catch you off guard. Diet is the easy part. When non-vegans think about veganism, they tend to only think about diet. Obviously, veganism is about a lot more than just the diet, but that's what we tend to fixate on before we make the switch.
Why does everyone keep fixating on that?
Before I went vegan, I thought finding food was going to be incredibly difficult. I thought I'd have to be constantly meal prepping and planning my meals and scheming about how to get enough protein. So I was really surprised to find that this just wasn't the case. I'm about to get a little scientific here, but I promise it'll be quick. There's a part of our brain called the reticular activating system, and it controls the motivational and behavioral systems in our brain. Since we're constantly bombarded with different inputs and information, the RAS chooses what we need to pay attention to. For example, a few years ago, I decided that I wanted to buy a scooter. Now, before that, I had never noticed the scooters in my neighborhood, but once I decided I wanted to buy one, I started seeing them everywhere. In the same way, before you go vegan, you don't have any reason to pay attention to the vegan options all around you. You may walk by a sign that says vegan options here 10 times a day and not even realize it. But once you've decided that it's worth pursuing, you're gonna see the vegan options that have always been around you. If you're not vegan yet, I'll leave some links in the description to help you find tasty food. And in the meantime, really just don't worry about diet. I promise you that it's the easy part. The next surprising thing about going vegan is a bit more challenging: other people's reactions. I'm not sure what I expected people to say when I told them I'd gone vegan. I think I thought they'd say,
"Oh, that's really great, it's good for the environment and you'll be helping tons of animals."
And honestly, a few people did say that, but the vast majority didn't. One of my friends actually watched Dominion and went pescatarian. Now, she's not vegan yet, but I'm still impressed that she was able to sit through the whole documentary and was open to talking about it, so I respect her more now. On the flip side, another friend who I actually talked to about veganism a lot before I went vegan, his reaction really caught me off guard. Before I went vegan, we had both agreed that vegans were probably right, but we were too lazy to go vegan, and it was just a lot more convenient to eat meat and dairy. So about a month after I went vegan, I texted him and I said basically what I said at the beginning of this video about how easy it is and how convenient it is, and then he hit me with the excuses. The important thing to remember is that other people's reactions to this information doesn't have anything to do with you, unless you were like a huge asshole when you told them. It has to do with their level of guilt around this subject and the conditioning that they've been through their entire lives. So it's important to try not to take negative reactions personally. Number 3, an increase in empathy and your sense of morality. If you had met me a few years ago and tried to talk about morality or philosophy, I just genuinely wouldn't have been interested. I wanted to go through life, have a good time, and let other people worry about making the world a better place. But once you start looking at the meat and dairy industry and all the problems that it's causing in the world, it opens you up to so much more. You start wondering about all the other ways that society has gotten things wrong, and you start to feel like maybe you can actually make a difference. People often accuse vegans of only caring about animal rights, but from my experience, it's really been the opposite. Most vegan activists I know do a lot of other stuff too. And when it comes to empathy, this seems like a chicken or the egg situation. We don't really know which came first. It's highly likely that people with more empathy are more likely to go vegan in the first place, but it's also possible that going vegan makes you more empathetic, which is certainly what happened with me. If empathy is a spectrum, I was probably somewhere in the middle, but after going vegan, I feel so much more empathetic toward everything. I never really cried during movies, and now I can barely get through an episode of Ted Lasso without tearing up.
I'm a major weeper.
To most people, I think morality seems like this vague idea that they don't really have to interact with, but once you go vegan, it starts to feel not only more real, but also more relevant to your life. You start looking for ways to constantly improve as a person, and it's pretty cool. But if veganism is an emotional roller coaster, empathy is the good part, and we're about to talk about the darker side of going vegan: misanthropy and frustration. It's hard to know where to start when you talk about the anger and the frustration that comes along with going vegan. You'll feel angry at society, your family, your friends, and humans in general. You'll feel angry at yourself for buying into the system of animal torture for so long, and it can be really overwhelming. You know, when you go your whole life thinking that people are generally pretty good and moral, and then you see animals being mutilated, tortured, boiled alive, killed in gas chambers. It can just be a lot to deal with emotionally. But then you start to think, okay, well, if I talk to people about it and I tell them all the bad things that are happening in the industry, then they'll go vegan too. And for me, a few of the people I talked to did go vegan right away, but most people didn't. They didn't even want to hear about it. They wouldn't watch the footage, and it became clear to me that they wanted to continue to live in blissful ignorance. This is very frustrating. It makes you question humanity's moral compass as a whole. You start to realize that people who are alive today are no more moral than people were in the past. You realize that their sense of morality is completely dependent on the culture around them. You lose faith in people's ability to think for themselves, and you feel like you can't trust people to do the right thing when it actually matters. So how do you break out of it? Honestly, I'm not the best person to ask. The only thing that helps me is talking to other vegans and doing activism. And drinking. So if you feel really misanthropic like I do most of the time, go to the vegan subreddit, go to other online communities, Discord, talk to other activists, get into your community. Remember that you are not alone, and because other people's sense of morality is completely dependent on their culture, it is up to us to change the culture. The future is in our hands. Normalize talking about veganism, show people how easy it is, and inspire them to make a difference. Remember that misanthropy won't help, and try your best to keep those negative thoughts at bay. Let's end on a more positive note. The number one most surprising thing about going vegan is that you feel so much more connected to animals. There's this idea in the vegan world that every child is born vegan because every kid loves animals until they're taught to eat them. But I don't think that's true. Some people really don't care about animals. Maybe they were conditioned that way, but maybe they just genuinely don't care. Personally, I was never a huge animal lover. Yeah, we had cats and dogs growing up, and I liked the cats, but I didn't really like the dogs. I was afraid of horses, I thought pigs were ugly, and I never really thought twice about cows or chickens. Everything started to change once I got my own dog 6 years ago. After that, I truly felt what it was like to love an animal, but there was always a power struggle there. Early on, when I got my dog, I read a few books about dog training, and one of those was by the Dog Whisperer, and it's about how you need to be a pack leader and the dog needs to submit to you and all this stuff with this weird power struggle going on where you're the owner and they're your pet. So when it came to my dog, I would scold him if he barked too much, I would pick him up when he didn't want to be picked up, and there was just kind of this underlying me trying to be dominant over him, and I think it really did damage our relationship. But once I went vegan, it opened me up to a greater level of connection with all animals, including my dog. There are studies that show that when we're eating animals, we tend to devalue them in our minds. We consider them objects and commodities, and because of that, we can't really form a deep emotional connection to them. And even if we don't realize it consciously, that's still there. And it's not until we change our habits and we stop viewing them as objects that we can really connect with the animals that are around us all the time. I used to come here to this park and maybe I would look at a bird, but I wouldn't really think twice about them, and I'd just kind of go on with my day. But now when I come here, it's like I can see the birds and I look into their eyes, and there are these geese, and I used to be afraid of geese, but now I'm just really fascinated by them. Or when I see an alligator, it's like I look into their eyes and it feels like I can feel their soul. It's pretty crazy. You've probably heard people accuse vegans of thinking that they're better than everyone else, but for me, the experience was the opposite. Now I know that I'm not better than anyone else, and I'm especially not better than other animals. I no longer try to dominate or control my dog. I don't consider myself his owner. I consider him just a companion animal in my life who I get to share the world with. So the most surprising thing about going vegan is also the least surprising thing about going vegan. Veganism is always all about the animals, and the most surprising thing is that your relationship with animals will totally transform. You'll feel a connection that you didn't know was possible, and it really is pretty freaking cool. So thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this, hit that like button, comment below, let me know what surprised you most about going vegan, and as always, special thanks to my morally superior patrons, Amy, Andy, Deepak, and Rebecca.